All right, welcome back, everyone. So now we're here in Blender. So this is Blender 4 point something or other. And we're going to begin by just clicking into our viewport area here. And I want to kind of give a lay of the land, a description of the user interface and some of the navigation stuff just to kind of demystify the program a bit first. So by default, we enter into our viewport here, and we've got three things in here. They always give us this cube, we've got a camera, and we've got a light source. I usually like to delete all of these things, but first I'll talk about what the camera does. So the camera is basically set up so that that's the scene that's going to be rendered, whether that's animated or a still rendering. So if I switch over here into the camera view, it pops me in and out of the view of the camera. And then one other thing that is really handy is if I go to view here and I go to camera, I can go to frame camera bounds, and that'll give me a full viewport focusing on what the camera, how the camera looks. So I usually jump in and out of that quite frequently. And then, so that's the camera view, that's the viewport view. So let's go ahead and just delete the camera because I want to clear out everything. Delete the cube, and I'll delete this little light source. So we can see over here on the right, this is what's in the scene. So if I go Control Z here, you can see there's the light, there's the box, or the cube, and the camera. So delete those. And I think if you have a Mac, you might have to hit X to delete for some reason, but PC people, you can just hit the delete button or the backspace, I believe. No, it's got to be the delete button or X. Okay. So other things, navigating the space. The way you control your mouse is slightly different than Rhino. So we use the center mouse wheel click to orbit, and we use the shift and center mouse to pan around the space. You can also click and hold on to the little pan up here on the right. You see right there. So if I click and hold on to it, I pan. And then if I click and hold on to this, I zoom in and out. Or we can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And then orbit, you just click and hold on to the world axis up here. You can also click onto the world axis to get the different views, and then switch back out of them. Up here on the top panel, you've got different visual styles, and we'll talk about those when we actually have some geometry in here. And then let's see, over here on the right, we've got some scene settings, we've got the world settings, we've got object settings, and we'll kind of go over these more, and then render settings and output settings and stuff, as well as modifiers and things. They'll all be over here. So anything you want to do to the scene, you're basically doing it here. Up here on the top, we've got object mode, and there's also an edit mode when we bring in objects. We'll show you that in a minute here. Across the top bar here, you've got the different styles of modeling and controlling your scene. Layout is basically moving objects around. Modeling is what it sounds like, creating your objects. Sculpting is more like if you were doing humans or whatever, and you wanted to like sculpt the facial features and stuff, you do that there. UV editing is very similar to what we were dealing with Rhino. It's a little bit less intuitive, I would argue, than Rhino 8, but it's something we'll go over substantially in here. Texture painting is painting your objects. So if you wanted to spray paint or add colors, gradients, that kind of stuff to your objects, you can do it there. Shading is controlling the materials. Animation we don't deal with. Rendering, composing, and geometry nodes we're not going to really deal with much. And then scripting is where you can run Python scripts to aid the program in general, like similar to like the renaming script that I ran in Rhino, but this is actually going to be where we can like batch export things and that kind of stuff. Cool. So that is the user interface. Next, let's go ahead and import our FBX that we exported from Rhino. So I go to import under file here, and I'm going to go to FBX here. And then I'm going to find my FBX. Here it is, and import. Awesome. So that is our model. Great. So let's talk about visual styles again. So wireframe right here. Shaded is like a shaded view in Rhino where you're not going to see any of the materials. And then this view here, you can see the materials. And then this view over here is going to be rendered view. And by default, the rendered view is set up with a real-time rendering software called Eevee, which is better for animated sequences where you don't want the burden of processing ray tracing. So let me show you. This is very key. Whenever you start a new project, we have to switch our rendering engine because in this course, what we're doing is we're doing still renderings in Blender. So if you click on this little camera, back of the camera kind of deal, and then you go to Eevee and you change it to cycles. That's what we want to use. Cycles, you can already see, is ray traced, right? And then right here where it says CPU compute, it might be grayed out for some of you. If you are setting the program up for the very first time, you want to make sure if you have a graphics processor, especially like an RTX or something like that, that you're using GPU compute and select it there. The other thing we want to make sure as far as rendering goes, that if you go to Edit, Preferences, and you go to System, you make sure that under CUDA here, you've got your graphics processor selected if you have a graphics processor capable of working with the software. If you're using a Mac, an M1 Mac, you might not even have any options here. It just automatically defaults to running with the M1 system. So so one other thing I want to do while I'm in the preferences window here is let's go ahead and set up an environment for our scene to light it with the sky. So Dynamic Sky is our plugin here, and by default, I believe now it comes with Dynamic Sky turned on automatically. So we'll just leave that there. And then to add the sky to your scene, I'm in my ray traced view here. I'm going to pull over this window and I'm going to go to Create, Dynamic Sky, Create. It doesn't change anything yet, but it adds it to an option on the world here. So I can now go over to my world settings and I can bump this down and hit Dynamic 1. And now we've got a sky in the background. Awesome. You can also, once it is created, you can tab back over to create here. You can change how the sun, how intense the sun is, the sky color, horizon color, cloud opacity, cloud density. Like if I want it cloudier, I can increase the density of the clouds. Cloud opacity, I can bring it down, so you can really kind of control how the look of your scene works here. So controlling the sun and the sky. Cool. So that is kind of the user interface and the basic settings that I like to use for setting up my scene. Okay, so the last thing I want to do before I start finishing off the materials is I want to create this again, basically. So right now we imported all of this as one singular FBX file. I want to now create multiple FBXs, one for each object in the scene. However, there are certain objects within the scene that are all separate, and I want to make sure that they're all together. So that way I don't have to, have 900 windows on my FBX here. So anything that I've got a whole bunch of it stored in what we call these empties up here. Any of these that we've got in our empties, we want to make sure, for example, glass is going to be a great example. So if I go to glass here and I open up this little file here, you can see every piece of glass in my scene is now completely separate mesh objects, right? So if I select all of them here, they're all separate. I can join them all together into one mesh, and it's going to destroy the UV maps for it, but I don't care with the glass because the glass doesn't have an image texture on it. It just has parameters that make it glass. So if I go Control J here, that just got rid of all of the glass, and now they're all on one mesh, which is great. But I do have to go to UV editing here and fix this because you can see all of the glass materials are overlapping on top of each other. So simple fix, we just go to UV here, Smart UV Project, and then I want to do an island margin because I want there to be a little gap between them. And I'm going to go 0.001, enter, and then hit OK. And so now it has created these UVs for all of the glass, nice and organized. Great. All on one UV map. So that's going to be really nice in the future. Great. So that's the first one I wanted to do. And I'm going to do it to any of the other objects in here that are all on multiple objects here, like the facade here. If I go to the facade, let me tab over here and go to the facade. All right. Facade, you can see I've got all of these objects, and I'm not going to use an image texture here either. So I am going to, let me scroll to the bottom here. Shift and select. Okay, so I got them all. Control J, join them into one object, tab over to object mode, or edit mode here, and then go to UV, Smart UV Project. Okay. Very cool. So that now gives me one UV map that has all of these, and it's nice. It seems like these are really nicely organized. I might even be able to change some of the materials on some of the objects just via the UV map if I wanted to kind of tweak the UVs to have different materials on different parts. Okay, great. So that's done. Next ones, we've got frames. I know that the frames are also a bunch of different settings here. So let's go ahead and go frames and select all those. Oops, I got to deselect. Tab over to object mode, frames. Okay, Control J. There we go. Frames, tab over, UV, Smart UV Project. Okay. So yeah, that makes it much easier now. You can see if I click on one object, it's going to select all of them. One thing to be mindful of is your doors as well. You might want to have separate meshes for your doors if you're planning on doing a door animation in Unreal Engine. So I joined all of the glass and the frames together into one. I'll probably end up having to come back in and edit that and delete it out and change it later on. But yeah, so once you get all that done, you can go ahead and we can batch export this thing. So great, let's go ahead and do that. So how to batch export, we do it with scripting here. So you go up to scripting, first make sure you saved your project, select everything in object mode. So you've got all of it selected. And then you go to scripting, and then we're gonna type in some Python script. No, I'm just kidding, there's templates. So we'll open up a template, go to Python, and then we're gonna go to batch export. All right. And that's going to batch export everything into the same folder your Blender file is in. Okay, and all we have to do is push play, and it runs the script. And then here it is. You can see all of the individual meshes for the FBX files going into that folder. Fantastic. The last thing we want to do is pull out some of the textures from this. So if you're working with a group or something and you want to be able to pack all of your textures and everything into your Blender file so that they will transfer with just the Blender file. All you got to do is go File, External Data, and then Pack the Resources. And that'll pack all of your textures and stuff into that folder, into the Blender file. And then all you got to do to bring them back out is go to External Data and Unpack Resources and use the file in the current directory. Great. And so now there should be in here a textures file. So yeah, you can see the brick, and these are all the textures that we've already done. And we'll pack and unpack them when we do all of the textures too. And then keep them packed as well for if I'm working with a team or something that I need to have the Blender file with all of the materials packed into the actual file. Great. So yeah, that makes all of these separate objects. Another thing that I like to do once I've made all of the FBXs is I like to go through here and look for the big ones, right? So grab it by size here. And then you can see what your largest meshes are, the ones that are going to be the most cumbersome in the Unreal Engine, right? So this one is 7 megabytes. It's not that bad. I mean, that's probably the biggest one, but if you've got something that's extraordinarily large, it's going to be a problem when you get it into the game engine. So you can go back then and kind of edit your object to make it the right size. All right, and then the last setting for optimizing your scene and your objects here is I'm actually going to go ahead and select everything in my scene and delete it. That's right. And then I'm going to bring it back with just the FBX files. Import FBX, go to the file where everything is located, and scan down, select all of it, and import. So that way we're working from, not from that one FBX, we're working from the many FBX files that we've created. Okay, and it looks about the same, right? Of course it does. So the last step is now to finish cleaning up a little bit more of the planar objects. So any of the objects that are completely flat, I like to actually decimate to get rid of unnecessary geometry. And what that means is if I click on, like, say, this piece here, you can see how many faces are on it, right? It's flat. It doesn't need all those faces. So I can go up here and add a modifier, go to Generate, and Decimate, and then I can come over here to Planar, and you see what it did? It just got rid of all unnecessary geometry. Basically, it says if anything is less than 5 degrees of an angle, it's no longer going to have a face. So it merges all of those faces. So if I go back over here, it's 127 faces, and then go to Planar, it becomes 6. Much better, right? Very cool. So I want to do that to everything that's flat. I want to do that to every flat surface and object in here just to keep it all nice and clean. And we're going to triangulate it back later on, which might sound a little weird, but when we're UV mapping our scene, like all of these little paintings and stuff that we've got, we don't want to have to deal with the multiple faces on the UV map. It's just an unnecessary burden. So like if I go to UV editing here and then tab over, you can see I've got all of these weird faces on my paintings. And so that's just going to make UV mapping that much more difficult. So I'm not going to mess with that. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to decimate things. So going back to modeling here, tab over out of edit mode, go to object mode here. Okay. Now, anything I don't want to decimate, anything organic, I don't want to decimate. I'm going to hide. So I'm just going to select like this one, H for hide. I'm going to come back into here, H for hide. And actually, H for hide. And yeah, you know what? I'm going to see if I decimate that, how it looks. But anyway, let's go here. So all my sculptures, I'm going to hide them. Okay, and I think that's pretty much everything I've got in my scene that's organic. The one thing I didn't consider is sometimes, oh, this painting too. The one thing I didn't consider is actually the circles on those windows there. They might come out a little bit jagged if I decimate the glass, but I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll see just how it looks. Okay. So we got everything kind of hidden. Next, let's go ahead and say, select one of these and add a modifier, generate, decimate, and planar. Now, before we apply that modifier or anything, we want to copy it to everything in the scene here. So I'm going to hit A, and then you can see the dark or the brighter orange here is the reference selection. So that is the primacy selected object. The rest of it is secondarily selected, and I can now copy the modifier to the rest of the scene. And I can do that under Object, Link, and Transfer Data. And then I can go to Modifiers, right? Or Control L brings up this linking as well. So if I go Copy Modifiers, make sure you save before you do this. It could crash your computer. A lot of decimation happening. Okay, you see how much cleaner it is in the scene now, right? So everything is just brought all the way down to a single panel there. Cool. So once you got it all like that, every single thing that you have will now have that modifier attached to it. And to apply the modifiers, we hit A, and we go to Object, and then we go to Convert to Mesh. And that, by converting it to a mesh, automatically applies all of those modifiers. Cool. So now everything is modified. Let's come down here to the glass. I'm curious. Oh, no, it looks pretty good actually still. Let's look at it. And yeah, perfect. Cool. So that is optimizing, setting up your scene, FBX wrangling, the whole deal here. To bring everything back, I go Alt-H or Option-H if you have a Mac, and that'll bring back all of the rest of the objects. I'm going to save this, and that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to finish out the materials on everything and do some interior renderings, and yeah, from there we move on to the Unreal Engine. So hopefully you found this informative, and you can see kind of the use cases for Blender as it's great for kind of controlling your meshes and really organizing things outside of the CAD. I believe that Rhino is great for modeling. Blender is great for optimizing. It's good for modeling too, but it's like a Swiss Army knife versus a chef's tool or something like that. You know, it's got so many parameters going on that I feel like all of the modeling tools in Rhino really make for stronger capabilities in a lot of areas here. So let's go ahead and call it a day. Thank you very much.